gang, your old pal Brian C. here, and we've got an interesting project today. We're going to remove this factory steering wheel from the '82 Chrysler New Yorker and replace it with a new steering wheel from the Grant Corporation. So let's dive into this and see what it takes to do this swap of these steering wheels. Now, the one thing I do know is the factory service manual was very vague about removing this steering wheel and its trim cover. Yeah, the basic instructions were remove steering wheel trim cover and remove steering wheel. So I'm believing that the first thing we have to do is remove the screws on the back side of the trim cover right here. So we're going to try and remove these and see if that allows the front cover to come off of the steering wheel so that we can remove it. Okay, so I got the first screw out, and we can see that made this back part of the steering wheel loose. But that wasn't affecting the type of change that I had really hoped for. And after a little more persuasion, I found out it was much more simple than that. A simple squeeze, and you can pop out the center cap assembly, and that gets you right into the business end of the steering wheel where we want to be to effect the steering wheel removal. Now seems like just as good a time as any to review what we have to work with here and take a look and check out the instructions. First off, we have the Grant steering wheel that we're going to use, and for those who are incredibly interested, I guess the model is 377. And for the Chrysler vehicles, you have to have a special installation or adapter kit, and I checked this out on their website, and the Chrysler kit is a, there we go, 4324, and this gives us the necessary nuts and bolts and pieces to actually make this work and fit on the Saginaw column that we have in the New Yorker here. Also, for a little bit of a dress up and to finish off the project, I came up with a genuine Chrysler horn button to replace the GT button that's on the wheel there. Ooh, see, that looks better already. Now, the only specialty tools I'm aware of you're really going to need for this, if you don't have one already, is a steering wheel puller. And this one is from the Lyle Tool Company, and the thing I liked about this was it's actually made in the USA. It's hard to find tools that don't come from offshore anymore, so I thought this would be a good sturdy piece that would last for years to come. So I guess we're ready to go about the business of removing the existing steering wheel. Sometimes the unboxing can be just as much of a challenge as the project itself. Grant says I have to take these plastic rivets and cut them off to remove the steering wheel from the package. Now, they're on there quite tight, so I'm going to have to find some sort of a cutting persuader to get that off without destroying myself, destroying the packaging, or destroying the steering wheel. So we'll see how this goes. Well, that wasn't too bad in the whole grand scheme of things, I guess. But now I see that inside the back part of the wheel here, there's some sort of a instruction manual or something that's stuck up inside there. You see they got that rubber mount on the back there, so the only way I think you can access this probably is to remove these screws that are holding the existing horn button on the front and take that off and hopefully get access to that manual on the back. Of course, you know, I've already had trouble with horn buttons with the steering wheel that's in the car, so this may all be for naught, but I'm going to break out the Allen wrench here and see if we can take these little screws out here and see what that shows for us. Okay, so we got this piece off the back of the steering wheel. I did remove those screws that were holding it in with the Allen wrench fittings. Be advised that this whole piece comes off the back of the steering wheel, so you want to support it from underneath so that you don't drop it on the ground and damage it in any way. I was fortunate. I realized it was starting to wiggle and move when I was taking out the last screw at the top, and so I grabbed it from beneath and took it apart and had no disaster. Just looking in here, there's obviously different ways to mount this, and I'm sure this will become more apparent as we get into the actual installation, but you can see where it's labeled top and top A and top B. So you have top B and top A depending on the vehicle you're putting it in, and this will all become more apparent as we work here more on the New Yorker. Now they do want us to exercise safety first and actually save our hearing a little bit, because in the process of doing this we're going to be messing around with the horn button, and we don't want those big horns there in the front sounding off unexpectedly. So they do recommend that we go ahead and disconnect the negative battery cable. So we're going to go about doing that right now so we can save our sanity and our ears here as we work on the project. Now, one of the things I was going to do to save my sanity was I had brought my Sharpie in, because a lot of times I have seen in the past when removing wheels from vehicles that someone, in an attempt to correct an alignment issue, has actually popped the steering wheel off, turned it a couple degrees one way or the other, and then put it back on. There are factory indexing marks, as you can see right here, and that's supposed to show the top dead center of the steering wheel. And in this case, I was going to mark this this screw here in the center with a Sharpie to show my indexing mark, but it appears the wheel has never been off of this vehicle, so we don't have to worry about that in this case, because we'll just use the factory indexing mark. But it is something you want to keep an eye on when removing a wheel or changing a wheel out. Okay, I just went ahead and pulled the little connector for the horn out of the area here where it was tied into the wheel, so the horn connector is disconnected. I don't think I needed to do that, but there's probably another connector on the back side of the wheel. I guess we'll find out. And now, with the aid of a 13/16 socket, put that on there. Very nice fit. Back in the days when cars were still made with American fasteners, we're going to go ahead and try and get that nut off of there. Well, I started with a shorty extension, and I decided it's not long enough because the end of the ratchet is going to be actually hitting the side trim of the steering wheel here, and I don't want to scuff this all up because it is nice, and at some point I may want to put the wheel back on. So I'm going to get a longer extension, but also realize that the overall leverage length of the drive handle is going to be insufficient. So I'm going to trade that out, and we're going to get the longer drive handle and see if a little more leverage will help us break this nut loose. I'm not a big fan of socket extensions. If you don't have to use them, you can end up screwing a lot of things up with them if you're not careful. So in this case, I was going through the tool cabinet and remembered that I had the flexible ended socket. So you see, you can put a little angle on it. And it turns out this angle is just perfect to get in here on our nut and still not damage the steering wheel. So this really is the right tool for the job, and we're going to go ahead and just get this out of here. And yeah, I broke it loose already, I admit it, but you know, this will just crank out of here in a few shakes and we'll be on to the next step. Okay, now it's time to break out the steering wheel puller. And you know, this is kind of a deal where we're applying equal force to both sides of the wheel by cranking down this center bolt here, and it pulls up and it'll pop that wheel right off at that point. Your kit will come with these attachment bolts that are in different sizes, so you have to find the ones that fit your particular steering wheel, and they go in these holes on this steering wheel here and here. And you have to determine, of course, your sockets that you're going to need to put these in. In my case, these are 9/16 inch heads and a 9/16 inch drive head on the main bolt. They also provided me these nice washers here that we put on the bolts to ensure that they don't pull back through the base of the steering wheel puller. So we're going to go ahead and get this mounted up on the steering wheel and see how we go about popping this wheel off. Hopefully it'll be pretty easy. So once the whole rig is installed, this is what it looks like. These are tightened down, not terribly tight, but tight enough that they have appropriate pressure. And then we have the center bolt going down, applying pressure on the main steering bolt in the center of the steering column. We've got the drive handle on here, and we just begin to apply pressure. And hopefully we'll hear this thing pop momentarily, and that'll be a good sign. I think it's already coming off. So there we go. We didn't even have to wait for a pop. And there we have it, the backside of a steering wheel from a 1982 Chrysler New Yorker M body. And yes, those are the two little screws there on the back that I worked so hard to take out initially when we started the project, only to find out they didn't really need to come out. And there's the inside of our Saginaw column. So we're ready to begin the reassembly process with our new Grant steering wheel. Okay, this is what they call the custom horn button hub. And it has a wire on it here for the horn button. And this is the one for this kit. And on the back is this copper disc that's going to make the contact for the horn. They tell you in the kit that there's a grease packet that you're supposed to apply to this surface so that when it rides inside the steering wheel here, it doesn't wear prematurely. Well, I kept looking around for my grease packet and looking around for it, and I finally found this poor little smashed thing that had grease oozing out of it around the area where the screws were in the little parts bag, and was able to salvage enough grease that I was able to slather some on the copper disc. So I think we're going to be okay. They want to make sure that we start following these top indicator. So I'm going to go with the top A, and we're going to line that up with our center mark that we have here on the shaft. Okay, let's give this a whirl and see how it works. And once I slipped it on there, this is pretty much what I ended up with. So that looks like we should be on the right track, I hope. So we'll keep moving forward from here. Now the instructions say they want us to remove the horn button from the wheel, and it has a metal plate on the back, and there are these little plastic fingers. I think you can see them there, and you have to squeeze those in around this plate, and then once you squeeze them in, this metal plate comes off and the horn button comes out, and that's going to allow us to mount the wheel onto the hub that we put in already. And it's okay to go ahead and do this because we've got that groovy new Mopar horn button that we're going to put on in place of this one anyway, so this is a good time to take care of this step, so let's go ahead and pop this off. So we got that horn button out of there, and this is what we're pretty much left with. So we're going to, at this point, get this ready to put in the vehicle. Now they give you a number of these steering wheel cover adapter plates in the kit, and so you have to figure out which one fits, and this one seems to be the one that's going to fit better on our steering wheel, because this one is column, because this one's much smaller than the column, so we'll toss that one aside. But just kind of had a revelation here, because you're supposed to kind of line up these little holes in here, and we'll talk about that more in detail in a couple minutes. But then you're supposed to take this piece here that we took off the back of the steering wheel earlier and line up these holes in here with these holes here, etc. And I couldn't quite figure out how to line it up because I'm like, I've only got two outer ring holes, and it didn't make sense. And then I remember back to when we actually took the steering wheel out of the package, and remember those nasty plastic fasteners that held it in the package? Well, here two of them still are, and I just popped the third one out of there. So these are the holes that you're supposed to use to mount the steering wheel to this device here. So you've got to get these plastic fasteners out of here so you have the holes available to work with. Okay, So after some playing around with this, we got the base plate on, and you have to get the holes to line up with that. You have to route the horn wire through the last hole that's on the base plate. Then you have to put the steering wheel base on that we removed from the steering wheel earlier. Remember, this is where our instruction package was stored. And then in that instruction package, we found these little bolts here. They're 7/16, and you have to put these through the 3 holes, 1, 2, 3. I'm going to pop this last one in here and tighten these down real good, because this is, you know, what's actually mounting the steering wheel to the vehicle here, so we want to make sure it's good and tight. And we'll proceed from here. I'll tighten these up and come back and check this out a little bit further, but just wanted to kind of give you a view, let you see what it looks like so far as we're getting it together. Pulled the horn wire through the hole in the plate and through the steering wheel mounting unit, so we've got that ready to go. So we're making headway here. Okay, this is truly scary. I would expect this from directions printed in some foreign country, not directions printed here, supposedly in this country. As you can see here, I'm on step 2 of the installation instructions that came with the installation kit for the car. And it talks about, you know, install the 3 bolts that we just did, torque them down to 10 to 12 foot-pounds. And then it says reinstall. And you go to the top of the page. Reinstall what? Where? It doesn't tell us. It just goes to step 3, which starts talking about attaching the horn buttons. And yet, we still have a unit here that's not attached to the steering column. So I'm assuming at this point we have to reinstall the nut that holds it to the steering column. Whoa, scary stuff. That's a real important step that they weren't very clear on. So we're going to go ahead and pop this nut back on here and crank that down and go from there. Okay, well, let's catch everything up to date here. We finally have this piece assembled onto the column, and we'll show you what exactly happened. When we put it on with the original instructions and everything, this piece here was actually touching the column here. So there was going to be no way that you could actually turn the steering wheel when you installed it on the vehicle. So I contacted the Grant Corporation and I said, what do I do about this? And they said, well, we will send you a replacement piece like this that will be more shallow on the side. It'll have more material taken off the side here, so it'll be more shallow inside here and basically won't rub against the column. Well, they called me back a day later and said, oh, we really don't have such a piece. And I said, that's great. I said, how am I supposed to, accommodate installing your product on the vehicle with the kit that I purchased that was supposed to be the adapter kit to make it fit on the vehicle? And their comment was, well, we really don't know. Perhaps you should contact a machine shop and have some sort of a spacer fabricated or something like that. But we have no other solutions for you. Well, that wasn't very thoughtful of them. So I started thinking about this, and I thought about washers first, and I said washers weren't a good idea. So then I thought, well, nice piece of aluminum would be nice if I could mill aluminum, but I can't do that. So I said, well, I needed something durable, and I thought about this particular material here. It's a type of a plasticized material, and I cut it out and cut different holes in it here to line up with the holes that were actually on this particular cap here. So I knew I would line up with the holes here in the assembly that I needed to line up with. And I made a bunch of these. I actually made 5 of them all total, and made these little spacers, and I put them into the column here until I got the spacing I needed. It turned out I needed 3, and I got some extra long bolts at the hardware store that were the same
diameter as the original Grant bolts, and put those into the column, and now we have finally made it to the point where we have a working mount for the top of the column and should be able to move further with the steering wheel installation. But that kind of gets you up to date as to the fabrication work we had to do outside of what the Grant company provided us for their particular installation kit, and the type of customer service they provided us, which basically said, well, good luck, have a nice life. So let's get back at the instructions here and see what fun awaits us next. Well, once again, I'm still kind of flying without a net here, because if you'll recall, we had that piece of the instructions from Grant that just suddenly got cut off in mid-paragraph, but it appears from what I'm reading that the next step is to actually attach the steering wheel to the assembly that we have here on the hub. There it is, we can take a look at it there. And we used those little Allen wrench screws that we had earlier been working with, and we attached those to that elongated base plate right there, and kind of used a crisscross motion in tightening those up so we had an even torque on them. And now we get back into Grant's instructions, and they say we have to connect the horn wire, so we're going to go ahead and do that right now. But wait, it's too good to be true, because remember we talked earlier, we have our special Chrysler horn button we're going to use. Well, pulled that out of the package, and of course no instructions on the package, but look at this, it's got this cool little trim ring on it that holds the horn button in place. By golly, I bet that's supposed to go on the back side of that steering wheel before we put that steering wheel onto that mounting bracket. So we're going to pull the steering wheel off, put the horn button on, then put it all back together again. Let's give that a try, see how that works. Well, and there we have it. Despite having to go through and, kind of feel our way through what little instructions there were, and having to improvise and manufacture parts on the fly and everything, we have a fully assembled steering wheel that looks very nice, and we're ready to go back out here and hook up the battery again and see how it works. So let's give that a shot here. Okay, so we have the battery hooked back up and the horn's not honking uncontrollably. Let's see if it really works. Hey, the horn really works. So step number one and test number one looks good. Let's try out some of the other things here. Okay, so we have fired up the vehicle and it appears to steer as it should. Let's see if these turn signals actually cancel. Hey, look there. Turn signals cancel. Why, horn still works. I think we finally have a success on this project. We're going to call this one a winner. Well, this concludes the installation of the Grant steering wheel signature series on the 1982 Chrysler New Yorker embodied 5th Avenue. Thanks for watching. Please don't forget to subscribe. Have a great day.